Hello, welcome to Rooms with a View, Season 2, Episode 2 on Make More Noise. Please press the like button, subscribe and share. We've got a really special week this week. I'm really excited about it. Coming up, we have Angela Wilde, long-time guest of the show. She's an activist from Get the Hell Out. She also has Wild Woman Workshop. How's it going, Angela?
Hey, I'm all right. Thank you. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Just got my new hair. A little bit like this all the time. What?
Very nice, very nice.
Yeah, getting used to it. Also, we have Kat Howard. Is a radical lesbian feminist teacher and sometimes writer for Lesbian and Gay News. How's it going, Kat?
All right there. Yeah, glad to be here.
And lastly, we have a woman known as Hanka on the internet. She's a lesbian and activist from Poland.
Hello, hi.
Hi. And also, I forgot, we've got Birdie Rose, the famous artist, as ever.
Yeah, you already know me, whatever.
So first up, we're gonna go to Angela Wilde, whose research has been in the news recently. What would you like to talk about, Angela?
Yeah, well, thanks for bringing me here. It's really, really good. I thought I would talk a little bit about the cotton stealing, just kind of to explain what it means if there are some of your listeners who maybe, or viewers who maybe haven't come across the term first very quickly, and then go through a little bit the finding of my research and talk about what happened this week. Do you want me to get started? Yeah. So basically, the cotton stealing is very special kind of sexual pressure placed on lesbians, sometimes leading to sexual violence against lesbians, where lesbians are pressured to include men into our sexual lives when these men identify or call themselves women or trans women. So these kind of things. That's pretty much what it means. Sometimes this pressure and coercion is is leading to sexual violence against lesbians. I've led a research in 2018, which was published in 2019, and basically what I found in that research is that this pressure is happening at 3 different levels. There's a big pressure from the mainstream. We know mainstream organizations, obviously, such as Stonewalls. Any LGBT organization is promoting the idea that men can be lesbians too, and that if you have lesbian sex, you might get pregnant. This kind of absolute crazy, gaslighting and the reversal. It also is promoted by organizations that are even more mainstream, like the UN, like Amnesty International, also promote this idea. And from these mainstream groups, then we see this pressure then happening, which is level 2 basically, in LGBT groups. Whether they're online, whether they're offline, and in dating sites, especially lesbian dating sites. And what I found in my research basically is that there is a huge pressure on lesbians in these LGBT groups, online and offline, to accept, basically to push the boundaries of lesbians, to make them accept men as sexual partners. And in my research, I found that basically 50% of the women who responded to my survey said that they had been excluded from LGBT groups, lesbians, when they said they didn't want to date people with penises, for example. And 66% said they had been intimidated and threatened. So it's quite serious. And then the third level is the interpersonal level, where you have individual men who identify as trans, who would then target a lesbian, pressure her, coerce her, sometimes groom her, and that can lead to sexual assault or to rape. And the statistic that's been pulled into the recent BBC article is that 56% of the respondents of my survey reported having been pressured or coerced to accept trans women as sexual partners. So that's pretty much the content of, very, very summarized, the content of my research. And so this week, there was this article in the BBC that was published. It was really, really very, very good, very long, very in-depth. I had a contact with Caroline Lowbridge, who wrote it about a year ago. She did very, very thorough research, got in touch with a lot of gender critical activists, tried to be in touch with LGBT organizations, nobody responded to her. She went to the trouble of finding survivors of the cotton stealing, and we have Kat here who will talk about it later. And the article has made, well, I think it was quite a bomb, really. It was huge in the media. And then what we found is from us, Get the Hell Out, we get very little press inquiries. We've had one, and we went to it very gladly. But pretty much it's been a little bit of a blackout from the media. They still don't really want to touch it. But it's still been, I think, really good in the sense that there's been some support. The BBC is stuck with it and stuck with the writer, and there's been a lot of support on the internet. So I also want to thank so much all the gender critical accounts, all the women and supporters who have been emailing the BBC. If you haven't done that already, please do it. It's so important. I think there was more than 5,000 positive comments after this, and this is really making a huge difference. So carry on doing this. That's great. And obviously,
I'll put a little link in the description so women can add to it.
If you also want to send messages of support to Caroline, you can get in touch with us and I can pass this on. I'll be really glad to do that. And we know that there's been a huge backlash. And I know some of you may be disheartened, but big backlash means, that it was a massive piece. The bigger the backlash means the job was really well done. So don't be disheartened. It's kind of, balanced. It's normal. But pretty much the backlash has been really brutal, and there's been this letter that has been signed allegedly by 16,000 people or more, although there's been some rebuttal about that I've seen on the internet.
Yeah, it's not accurate figure.
It might not be accurate. There might be some of those that are not real people. So that's pretty much where maybe I'm going to leave it. And I want to say about the dismissal, I mean, I don't know, that it's been really truly horrible for me as the researcher to read this dismissal saying, it doesn't, it's a very small survey, it doesn't really matter, it doesn't count. I've spoken to women who have been victim of these crimes, and on their behalf I felt extremely upset. Rape is not an anecdote when it happens to you. It's a terrible thing. And I'm really, really shocked about the fact that they can just dismiss survivors because, they think the sample size was too small or something. I can talk about this later maybe, but I just thought maybe it's a good idea to get you, Kat, to talk about your experience about this. And also I wanted to say to the audience before you come in that I'm very, very, how can I say this? It's very hard to talk about sexual violence when it happens to us. And I'm very impressed by you and women who speak about it. And I want everybody to kind of really remind yourself that we're living in a very, very silent and violent time, and that we should give survivors respect.
Yeah. So yeah, it's been a very odd week. I'll say. When I got in touch, yes, with Caroline Lowbridge, it was about this time last year. It was November 2020, and I did this interview talking about my experience, and I spent the next few weeks, bated breath, looking out for it in the BBC, preparing myself, and when it was never published, I just thought that it had been dropped, it was never going to happen, and I sort of forgot about it. I forgot, about giving this interview. And so when it came out last week, it was a big, big shock. And it's been fantastic seeing so much support from gender critical accounts, from radical feminists, from women. But the backlash, I haven't received much of it personally, but just knowing that 16,000 people, maybe less, but just knowing that so many people were willing to sign a letter to declare that basically myself and other women were lying, was a big hit to take. Because it did take a lot to talk about this. When I talked about it last year, it was it happened to me when I was at university, which was just a few years ago now, but it's, it still was not an easy thing to talk about. And before I had talked about it with Caroline Lowbridge last year, I hadn't actually talked to anybody about my experience as I had done. So just talk a little bit more about what I what I experienced when it comes to the cotton ceiling. It was my first year of university, so I was 18 years old. I had only just joined my LGBT society, so it was at the second term, I think. I wasn't having a great time at university as it was. I'd found it really, really difficult. I hated every moment, basically. And I was preyed upon, I suppose is the word I'd say here, because I was very much targeted by this individual, by this trans-identified male. They very much zoomed in on me at LGBT meetings. And then on a night out, when I was what I would absolutely consider far too drunk to consent to anything, they very much, again, prayed. They were totally sober. This was somebody who didn't drink, who we lived quite close to each other in halls, so decided that they were going to help me get home, and then proceeded to take that much further and pressure me into sex. And this then was somebody who later went on to, again, take advantage of two other lesbians in my society. And in my year, so I was in first year, there was only about 4 out lesbians. We were very much a society of, when it came to the women, most of the women were bisexual. So this person preyed on the lesbians in this group and who they knew to be the lesbians, that they targeted the women who were, supposedly, who are homosexual women, and that's who they wanted. They didn't go for anybody who identified as bisexual. It was just lesbian women. And this person was only at the university for 6 months. They were an exchange student, which means that in the space of 6 months, they assaulted 3 women. So that's a huge statistic. I think they assaulted me within one of their first couple of weeks. And the fact that this happened, it wasn't just the once, as in like what happened only once, but what then happened was a week, like weeks of this person messaging me constantly to, oh, could we meet up again? Could it happen again? When I'd say no, they would message me about how depressed that made them, send me pictures of themselves self-harming to try and blame me. When I did eventually block them, all this whole time I felt like I was the person at fault here. Our society was very much already by this point, and like I say, this was about 9 years ago, that you should be same gender, not same sex attracted, that trans women are women. I felt like I'd done something wrong by not reciprocating this. And when I did eventually cut this person off, this person then went around the rest of the society and told everybody that I was a transphobe, I was a TERF, but also I was a slut. And meant that I actually didn't feel comfortable going back to my LGBT society. I then was lost what was supposed to be my community, and I couldn't return until this person had left. So I couldn't go back until second year, basically. And I know that other women felt very, very similar. This person made lots of people uncomfortable, but somehow we were the people held to be at fault for that. So it was a very, very difficult time. And I know when I spoke to Caroline Lowbridge about this last year, when I started to explain what happened to me, it took her by surprise when interviewing me. It seems that when she started the article about the cotton ceiling, when she heard about that lesbians were being assaulted, she'd assumed it meant physical. She'd assumed what was happening was lesbians were turning trans-identified males down and being physically assaulted. It seemed to take her by surprise when I started talking about sexual assault. But that is what is happening. That is what is happening to lots and lots of lesbians. And like I say, it has been very, very hard to see plastered all over Twitter and social media and even mainstream media that this is just the working of anti-trans activists, lying TERFs who just want to take down the LGBT, that even by our so-called community, we're being told to shut up, be quiet, because this is just going to be used by the right-wing conservatives. That suddenly, believe all women is totally ignored when it comes to the experience of lesbians. So it's been a tough week, we'll say.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for coming on the show and talking about it. I appreciate how difficult it must be for you to come out and to come out sort of publicly and stand up and say, no, it happened to me. I think so often it's the case that when an uncomfortable sexual assault case comes up, if it's not a member of your tribe, then it's very easy for people in that tribe to dismiss that person and to sort of go after them. But like I say, this is supposed to be your tribe. This was supposed to be the umbrella and the family. This was the society itself. It sounds like they all knew. I mean, everybody knows when a guy's a little bit off, and it sounds like he was known that his behavior was a little bit concerning, but the fact that he was just given carte blanche, I mean, I'm so sorry for what you went through. It's absolutely shocking, and I think for a lot of people, they don't really want to believe it, or they don't believe it. I think it's something that a lot of women, when they hear about it, it reminds them of when men are very pushy. I think it's something we can all relate to, and the fact that this is happening to lesbians and is endorsed by, like I say, the institutional and the cultural and the social institutions themselves. Thank you, Kat, for coming on and speaking with us.
Yeah, it's something that has, like I say, been a difficult week, but the fact that the first thing people did when they read this article, the first thing that got attacked was, these are anonymous sources, so they don't count, meant that it's, I'm going to stand up for this, that this is happening to, my lesbian sisters. I'm not having it happen to anybody else if I can help that.
Well, power to you for doing this, really.
Yeah.
I'm really I want to say that the detail, and the pattern of assault that you describe is very, very common. It's actually, my findings show exactly the same. Young lesbians, university, there are some patterns that just come back. Guilt tripping is a big one. I had a case of a guy who said he was autistic and said that he was self-steaming. Basically, he was masturbating on the woman. A lot of that has been very, very recurrent, and it's really, really worrying that I want to put that in the context also of what's happening to Kathleen Stock today, because it's happening in a university to a lesbian. She's a lecturer. It's horrendous what's happening to her. I mean, I was in tears listening to her today, but there are some there are some lesbians who will be studying in the universities. What is it like for them? What is it like for the other staff? What is it like to be an 18-year-old at Sussex University when you see this high-profile case? This is the reality, and this, it's trickling down from the mainstream, the institutions, and then who is the last one? It's the 18-year-old, 17-year-old lesbian in an LGBT group, in an LGBT society in universities. It's absolutely shocking, and just happening all the time. I want to talk also about the fact that we have a website called Lesbian Me Too, and in this website we encourage lesbians to live experience, like basically write their experience of sexual assault by men, and including the men who call themselves women. We don't really see the difference, but it's a searchable website, so you can click on cotton sealing and get the cotton sealing stories. And again, it's, you can see the themes: university, youth, and so on and so on. It's really, the word you use, targeted, predated against, it's absolutely horrible, but very, very recurrent.
Yeah, I mean, in the time of Me Too, I mean, does anybody have any idea? I mean, what can account for this apparent dismissal of all the sort of wrong kind of victims. I think we've seen it with the cotton ceiling. We've seen it with the girls in Loudoun County who were victims in the toilets, and it seems like they're very inconvenient, and it seems like it's believed in, except those ones, except the ones that make you uncomfortable and sort of show you a little bit guilty.
You used the word before that I found really interesting, the LGBT family. Family. In family, there are dirty sexual predators, secrets as well. In families as well, the parents who are there to protect you, or you suppose family members who are there to protect you will commit sexual assault, or will turn a blind eye where it happened, or exclude the victim when she speaks out. The word family is an interesting one. I think, generally speaking, rape victims are not believed at first. I don't think there is a special thing because it's happening to lesbian, but generally it took a long time for Me Too to happen for straight women too. I think it's just like something that most people would rather not talk about, because I think a lot of people know.
I think as well, when it comes to the cotton ceiling, the experience of lesbians just reminds people that this is male behavior, that what lesbians are experiencing is classic male behavior, predatory and targeting, and the taking advantage of, and the violence as well. This is classic male pattern behavior, and it reminds people that trans women aren't women when it comes to this behavior.
I think that's the bit that people hate the most, because they're going through extraordinary lengths to stand by this lie in order to signal to everybody else that they're not one of the bad people, and admitting that something as egregious as this is happening and that you know that you're aware of it. Once you hear about it, you can think of examples of times that you have heard of a woman in a situation, or you've seen a man be a bit more than pushing his luck on somebody's boundaries, and you've not stepped in, and people feel incredibly conflicted about that, and they don't want to, because like you said, it comes down to admitting that these men are not women, and they don't want to do that. They're not willing to make that sacrifice.
Yeah, I think that was very much what happened like to me, and what happened to the women at my university. To turn around, even though everybody could spot this behaviour, even though this behaviour was absolutely no different to the predatory men that we saw on nights out, that we'd all, complain about, even though it was absolutely no different, to admit it was no different, and to admit that this person had the exact same behaviour would be to admit that people saw this person as male, and this person was male.
As well as that, going back to what Angela said about it being families protect predators, because often the most common reason I can think of is to protect their reputation, and it's the same here. And people are looking out for their own selves.
And the reputation they want to protect is they are the most oppressed. Not only that they are women, that they are the most oppressed kind of women. So that really the myth completely, absolutely.
And now they're even starting to spin it around so that lesbian women are the perpetrators.
Oh, of course.
Absolutely ridiculous. It's so insulting to take a story about victims of sexual violence. How is it any different to any other attempt to slander sexual violence and rape victims? And yet this is being perpetrated not by the people we'd expect, but by so-called progressives, by people who, a couple of years ago were jumping on board the Me Too, we believe all women, and yet the minute it's lesbians, the minute it's saying that the new most oppressed trans women are committing the violence, they're totally dropping it. It's one of the things I find the absolute most insulting.
But there is a background to this. I mean, already lesbians are not considered to be real women. Lesbians are also not considered to be potential victims. And I think it's quite common for a lot of people in the straight world to think of lesbian as being as predatory as men. It's a stereotype that already exists, that they are actually playing on. This is pure lesbophobia promoted by the GBT really, because thank you all, nothing to do with these people. And they're just repeating patriarchal lies about lesbians. That's it.
Well, yeah, there is a stereotype that lesbians are like sort of manly and not, and therefore they get sort of ranked as not quite women, right? Do you feel that that's true? Because I'm not a lesbian, so I'm just saying what I think from experience of growing up around girls that did grow up to be lesbians, and how they were, especially in school, taken as one of the boys, literally taken as one of the boys, you know, and you treat them like one of the boys. You didn't treat them like one of the girls, but that was innocent enough in school. But when you get older, to realise the implications of that goes much deeper.
I would say I was I have personal experience of being counted as one of the boys from my school. I remember back then it really hurt me, but just because I looked gender non-conforming, I had short hair, and I'm quite tall as well. I was always grouped with the boys just for that. So I definitely see that, and I feel that. So just like this comment really hit me when he said, because just it really happened from when I was really young. And it's interesting that it's universal experience, and it doesn't matter the country because we are from different places, right? And yet it's just all around. And same with the thing about the reputation, about the family and the violence. Like everything you were saying just hits really personally, but I do not speak about these things publicly yet. That's why, like, for me, Kat, it's really amazing that you decided to speak out, because I know how difficult it is, because I personally did not choose to speak out on some things I've experienced. That's why I really appreciate that you did, because it's important to hear these stories.
Yeah. Thank you. It's like I said.
Sorry, go on. Oh, go on, Kat.
I was just going to say again, coming back to that family thing. It's what you need people to talk about this when they can, if they can, because otherwise the LGBT is going to be so quick to silence. They are the people. The people who are trying to negate this story, who are trying to pretend this isn't happening, are all members of the LGBT community, and unfortunately, some of them are fellow lesbians who want to be the good lesbians, want to be the ones who, you know, they never would, they never actually would go any, you know, consider a trans-identified male as a sexual partner, but they want to pretend that they're the good people who would, and we're the evil people who are being honest and admitting that actually no, our sexuality is homosexual, and that's not what we do. That's not what being a lesbian means.
Well, no, it's shocking. I think the CEO of Stonewall in the same article likened homosexuality to racism almost, you know, to say it's the same. Why, you know, and I think when we've got to that state where the UK's largest LGBTQ now society, that this is sort of being allowed, and all in the name of kindness. It's an absolute reversal of what's going on, and sadly, I think it's all too familiar whenever a girl comes forward in the church, in the Catholic Church. I think this reminds me of a lot of the dynamics that happened in the Catholic Church. And there was a comment by a woman, a feminist philosopher, who said something along the lines of, I know this is bad that some people are experiencing this, but we should keep it in the community because there are people looking outside who are going to judge us on this. And it just reminds me of somebody, that's exactly what somebody would have said in the Catholic Church with the priests for so many years, when everybody knew this was happening.
Yeah, this was really shocking.
Yeah, I really want to touch up on that as well. Being from Poland, that is really Catholic country, we do hear that a lot. Like a lot of people on the left would attack the Catholic people, saying, "Why don't you call out the pedophiles? Why don't you call out all the priests?" And yet, when it happens on the left side, they are silent. Like, how can you expect people to do it, and yet you yourself are blind to this happening on your own side? So it was really shocking for me when I realized that this was happening. And yeah, I just find it's just crushing for me. Again, as a person, I used to see myself as a very leftist person, and I've seen that, like, that all the ideals that they promise, they just don't live by these ideals. So
Yeah,
Can I?
I've had.
Oh, sorry.
Oh no, I was just going to say, like, again, along the same lines as the so-called feminist philosopher. I've had people I went to uni with who've come out and been like, oh yeah, that was terrible that happened, and yeah, that person was weird, but we could have dealt with this. And it's just, well, you didn't. So
Easy to say in hindsight, isn't it? Can I ask you all a question? So obviously I don't know all of the answers, so I just ask you guys. Where do you think you might know the answer to this? Where do you think the cotton ceiling came from? Because my theory is it came from pornography, and this is like the last boundary men can break on women.
Definitely. I mean, we know that lesbian is one of the leading search term in porn, like, forbidden. Interestingly, lesbian and teen, the very demographic they should never get close to. So there's an obsession. Men are obsessed with lesbians, absolutely. And also historically, the first people who have been talking about the cotton ceiling or coined the name were mostly porn performers. So I'd say there's an obvious link, yes.
I mean, I think it also, we need to talk about autogynophilia as well, like the elephant in the room. I think with a lot of this is it's not on people's radar yet. The men have a fetish where they imagine themselves to be women. And I think a lot of it is a lot of anger and resentment that they want to be this thing, but they seem to hate this thing. And, I think that's a driver which is uncomfortable to talk about, and they don't want us to talk about because that will let the cat out the
the actual definition of cotton ceiling, again, to just remind everybody, is the knicker of the lesbian being a barrier to an LGBT male accessing real womanhood status. So yes, it is pornography, it is ADP, and you're supposed to validate that man by giving yourself away. No.
So do you think there are men that are sort of like sexually falling in love with themselves as women, but in order to validate themselves as women, they feel that the ultimate way to do that is to become a lesbian and then obviously break that barrier into going into a lesbian encounter or relationship, even by force?
Yeah, I think lesbians represent for a lot of these males, it's the ultimate validation, isn't it? If a woman who is solely attracted to women will have a sexual relationship with you, that must mean you are totally 100% woman. Mm-hmm. It's why bisexual women are not necessarily experiencing the same thing, because it is that lesbian status that so massively appeals to these people, especially, I'd say, more than anything, if they can get a lesbian whilst they still have male genitalia. Because
sorry, I'm interrupting. I didn't mean to. That makes sense, because I was just thinking this is about wanting the things that you can't have and can't become, isn't it? So you said the ultimate validation is to get a lesbian woman because that's going to be the one that only goes for women sexually. And that makes sense, because have you noticed that a lot of men online that identify as women, they will go into groups like pregnancy groups or PCOS or endometriosis groups, the thing that they definitely can never have, and they will assert their dominance in those groups to be validated specifically in those areas that they definitely do not belong in. So I think there is a definitely an aspect of that going on there as well, and I think it relates to what they're doing with lesbians.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's as Kat was saying, because the definition of a lesbian is a woman who only have sex with women, if she then consent under pressure, under coercion, under grooming, under years of queer theory brainwashing, when she says yes because she can't say no anymore, then he magically becomes a woman. And I think also that's probably why coercion and pressure and grooming is so prevalent in these stories, because they need them to agree. you know. And I think also maybe that's why it's difficult to get women to speak about it. You know, I mean, it's difficult as it is already, but because the brainwashing is just such a powerful thing to undo that it will take years to realize what the hell has happened. You know, we've heard story of unacknowledged rape. Here's a big one about unacknowledged rape, I think.
I'm thinking maybe to tie up this conversation now. If anybody has anything else they want to add to it, but I actually have an interesting question for Hanka. Being in Poland, how is the situation in Poland with the LGBTQ community? Like, do you still have a lesbian community left in Poland? Like, how is it? Are these sort of stories similar to what's happening elsewhere in like non-English speaking countries?
So interestingly enough, we have all the issues you have as well, minus the rights you have. So it's very grim a situation because, okay, in here, LGBT people are recognized by law, protected by law, officially at least, can have legalized relationships and whatnot, which is not a case in my country whatsoever. And so in already this grim situation, then we have the LGBTQ whatever thing and the name queer. The thing is that I didn't know the meaning of the word queer before because we just used it in Poland. We had queer marches and I just thought that's basically what it means. But only like recently, like in the last 2 years, I realized like what it means and where it comes from, because it's just like everything was just copied from the West without the actual rights and movement. So right now we have all of the things. We have all the men identifying as lesbians. We have bi lesbians, pansexual lesbians, using degrading language, saying that of course lesbians will need abortion because they, you know, some lesbians have penises. On like big accounts, we have Stonewall Poland as well, and we have some other organizations who just basically say the same things that they say in your country. So it's very sad. And Stonewall Poland, for example, had a series of 5 posts on Instagram saying what is a TERF and why you should be afraid of it. So yeah. And you know, it's all in the climate of ban of the abortion, all in the climate of the rise of far right, of dismantling democracy in our country. But you know, that's not an issue really. It's the few of the TERFs who made, you know, all our country destroyed, basically. Not the radicals. Not them. It's just few women, most of them lesbians, who are the most danger to everyone in our country, really. Which is really, it's funny when I say about it, but it's really sad and it's really traumatizing if you think about it. That, you know, even we do have the marches. That there's a proposed law to ban the pride marches, by the way, in Poland. I don't know if you've heard about it, because they don't want the homo propaganda on the streets. So basically similar to, for the audience from the UK, it's similar to Section 28 that you had. They want to have that in Poland as well. So it would like not allow people to promote homosexual marriage idea. You could not speak. It would be illegal to speak about it because it goes against the traditional values in our constitution, because our constitution says that marriage is a relationship between a man and a woman. It's literally in our constitution. That's why it's been so challenging to progress in the LGBT rights in Poland, just because of that constitutional thing. And yeah, the scary thing is that the group that proposed that law, that already has been voted on in the government. So they had the first reading and it passed to the second stage. So it's not even like it didn't stop at the first stage, it passed for the second stage. So the group who proposed this law is the same group that is responsible for the abortion ban. So that's why it's even more scary, because of how successful they were with the abortion ban. And as you know, a woman died already in Poland because of it. She went into a septic shock because the doctors told her that they're just going to wait for the fetus that was already dying within her to die itself, because they couldn't do the abortion of the fetus because it's illegal now. Anyway, so that's the feeling of it. And I remember for me, why did I start even speaking about publicly in Poland on the whole issue, is that I was going to the protest, the women's strikes, when we heard that they want to further the abortion ban and whatnot. And in the midst of that, in the midst of going on the streets every other day, like I went to every protest in my city. It was not happening every day, but it was happening a few times a week. And I went to our capital for like the biggest protests and different places. And then on some feminist websites, so-called feminist websites, the article appeared saying feminism should be, I'm translating the title right now. So it's like feminism, trans, inclusive, or dead. We are on the streets protesting for our basic human rights. And articles like that show up. It's like a spit in the face of women. And the thing is, there were groups saying that we shouldn't use the word woman anymore because it's not inclusive enough. And we were saying, there was this thing we're saying, it's called piekło kobiet, means the hell of women. And some people would say, the hell not only of women. I was like, no, I'm done. Like I knew that turfing out, it's something that's probably going to cost me a lot, and it did cost me a lot because I already saw that happen abroad. But I was like, no, I cannot stand this bullshit anymore. I was also in this like small collective in person in my city. I joined just recently back then with the protests and stuff. We were doing some things, and I've been removed before turfing out because I said in the group that I think saying that not only women's hell is disrespectful towards women, and they said it's not inclusive, blah, blah. And then I also said that the uterus is a female organ, and that was very transphobic of me and very hateful and awful, and I was kicked out. And then I just like, with this and the articles and all this stuff, I was just like, you know what, I'm just going for it. So that's how it started for me, at least. But it's very sad because the thing is now, so many like very ridiculous ideas pass so quickly in terms of the queer world in Poland, because they use this emotional blackmail, saying that if you don't agree with us, that means you support our government who banned the abortion. You see, if you don't agree with this and that means you definitely are a far righter and you just whatever, and conservative, whatever. Like, so now we have trans children, we have few-year-old children on the media, and it's like, oh, it's great, trans children, and mother saying, oh yes, my trans son, who's like a few years old girl, because he always liked having short hair, and like literally you just put all the stereotypes, and if you try to say something against it, then you're like the worst person in the world, and you support the regime of a government. Like, it's just ridiculous. So and same, besides all of these, of course, there's a lot of things to say about the sex business and prostitution thing. In Poland, prostitution in Poland is not criminalized. It's not criminalized, but pimping is criminalized, to my understanding. And so there's this huge organization called Sex World Poland, and they work towards decriminalizing of prostitution, but it's not criminalized. It's not criminalized. So they want decriminalization of pimping and pandering and whatnot. And it's all very connected. Like, so all of the organizations, the pro-abortion organizations, the trans organizations, and the prostitution organizations, they all work together. So it's very difficult to go against that, because they're all like respectable organizations, and they're popular, and they have thousands and thousands of followers. And so whenever me or any other woman speak out anything against them, we are like the worst possible TERFs in the world, and they just like send their followers to attack any woman, especially lesbians, that do not agree with that. So generally, that's the outline of the situation in my country.
Thank you for explaining a little bit about that. It's really interesting, and I think it's as hard as it is in the UK to push back. We don't have a considerable right wing, I don't think, to the same extent that you do in Poland. We don't have to fight for abortion. That's long established, and that's part of there's nobody looking to take that away. And I think it must be so much more difficult now that all of these things are bundled together. Like, if you're pro-abortion, you must be pro-prostitution and pro-trans rights, which is men's rights. I think it's a real a real worry. And like I say, yeah, you kind of really are stuck between a rock and a hard place over there.
It strikes me that they use the same strategy here, but obviously we're not in the same situation as you're in Poland. But they do call us right wing. I mean, they do call us Trump supporters and goodness knows what else. But yeah, it's really jumping from one regressive ideology into another regressive ideology who calls itself progressive. Don't get any kind of nuanced debate.
It seems absolutely baffling just to listen to the situation, to have such a right-wing government in place who's trying to, eliminate all sort of pride and totally eradicate, even being able to see visible gay and lesbian people, and then to have people instead pushing to eliminate women and to focus instead on queer politics when they don't. They're fighting the fight for basic gay and lesbian representation, and they'd rather not have that so they can have queer politics instead. Seems like absolute insanity.
I think it really brings home the nature of that this is such a luxury belief, and it's difficult enough when it gets introduced in places like England, but when it happens to countries that don't have the same rights, the same gay rights, women's rights, I think you can see how damaging it is. And the fact that they've almost bundled together and they're almost blackmailing people. It's like, if you want to have abortion, then you also need to accept all these other harmful things that are also so damaging for women. To what extent do you think, you mentioned that there was a law against like the new Section 28, and you can't teach about homosexuality in schools? Do you think that any of the pushback in Poland, do you think that any of it is to do with the trans things? Because now you've welded gay and trans together. Is there a feeling that maybe some of this sort of backlash or fight against gay people is actually related to not wanting to have queer theory taught in schools? Is any of that crossing over?
So I want to clarify that it's similar to your Section 28, but they start with it for the public space, so it's directed directly at the Pride marches, but it's the same idea. So it's like on the marches and in the public area, you cannot speak about it, but it will follow. Like, if this passes, then in law we'll have written something about not promoting homosexuality. It's gonna go further, but it's starting about the marches, really. So I just wanted to clarify that for the beginning. And in terms of the trans pushback on that, I think there's a lot of issue that the biggest negative impact that was on the LGBT rights in Poland is accepting kink and dress up in the pride marches and everything. Because yes, also in Poland we have these people who dress like the dogs, like you have here in England as well. So in Poland, from this year's Pride, there was this horrible photo. There was this kinky dressed up guy with a woman on the leash with her boob almost out, and a kid holding the leash as well with this guy. And it's like, I'm like, why do you, like, why is this happening? And people are like, oh, this is progressive. Everyone, like, read the room. Like, read the room, honestly. So for me, I think it's more of the general queer backlash of, because Poland is a conservative country in morals and in behaviors. So it's not very welcomed to have this type of sexual-based behaviors on the streets in general. So I would say a lot of that is problematic and caused a lot of issues for the LGBT community. And of course, we have partially the whole drag culture, which is very similar to trans-identified male culture, there's not much difference. It just goes step further for that. So a lot of course, the community will always heard the argument, oh, it's gay men are just pedophiles. That's, just right-wingers always throw that, but then they do not address the pedophiles in the church. Again, that's what we said before. So it's just, they're just throwing it at each other. But I think generally, copying and pasting the whole pride type of vibes into Poland was never a good idea, and it did regress any hopes for the LGBT rights within Poland. I think the approach would be like LGBT Alliance does, just like regular LGBT people without dressed normally, just in relationships, but not going half naked on the streets in a dog uniform. It's so I think that's definitely the kink type of queer approach is what is very unhelpful for LGBT people in Poland.
Yeah, so it's again that idea of like that sort of that ridiculous privilege of we're going to parade our kink and in doing so harm LGBT people who are already struggling in a very conservative country here. It's again just the absolute selfishness of queer theory, an absolute selfishness of queer theory followers here.
Well, clearly, this was a heterosexual couple you're talking about as well.
Obviously, there was a man and a woman on the knees, and the child. I don't know whose child that was. I don't know what that child was doing there. Yeah. It's quite horrible. I'll actually try to find that picture. Maybe it's because they posted it just like as a normal picture. It was not posted to like make fun of it. They just posted it as a great parade and
really, this is how they live. I want to again say that it's possible to be having a critique of kink and BDSM and all these so-called play without coming from a religious background at all. There is a feminist critique of that. That's exactly.
it. I'm an atheist. I grew up in a Christian household, like most of the people in my country, but I'm an atheist myself. So it's really funny when they always like try to portray me as a conservative trad wife, Christian, something like. And it's funny because like a lot of people know me. They know me 10 years ago, and they know these are like all bullshit claims, but they call me a fascist too. Yep. People I know, like honestly, you know me for so long, and you call me a fascist because I said women are women. Like,
yep, same here. Do you know what I was thinking as well about when you was talking about the kinks and the people dressed up as dogs or whatever? That is just straight people wanting to be special and attention seeking and wanting to be part of this family that's been advertised to them as the new cool thing to be a part of.
It's also a way to promote heterosexual, a very extreme heterosexual. I mean, the man is with the lead and the woman is on her knees. Like, this is what it means. This is, to the extreme, the meaning of heterosexuality. And
it's not even just normal straight people, is it? It's extra, straight extra.
Yes, I was going to do a joke, not funny, but yes, it's promoting a certain idea of heterosexuality and calling it queer. Like, there's different level of gaslighting there as well.
Okay, I have the picture. I have the lovely picture. I don't know if it's visible. Yeah.
I don't know if I want to see it.
But it's a trans flag there as well.
But you made
I don't know.
Good point.
I will send it to you over the WhatsApp. Maybe you can share it somehow. It's from this year's Pride Parade in Warsaw.
I was going to say, Angela, you made a good point that it's under the name of queer, because what these straight people who are a bit extreme straight people are doing is they're muddying the waters. So gay people and lesbian people, bisexual people are getting tarnished with the brush of these extreme kinks that straight people have. And so I imagine a lot of LGBT people have spent a lot of time over the last 30 years, especially in the UK, trying to get away from the idea that they're perverted and they've just got fetishes and all that stuff. And now that's being all brought back onto them by straight people.
Yeah, I think.
Sorry, Kat, go on.
Oh no, I was also going to say it also allows, I think, here for the spicy straights, as I think we can call them, to decide that LGBT people who don't go along with this don't have to be included in the new queer community they're trying to get to replace the LGBT.
Yep.
And so they can dismiss us and be like, well, we're talking about the queer community and you're not queer. And then totally eradicate the fact that our material reality here is the oppression that these spicy straights so clearly want.
It's an unbelievable level of entitlement, isn't it?
Well, I mean, I think there's also another really uncomfortable thing which we often don't talk about is we like, it's easy to say queer is straight and things, but I think gay men have played a little bit of a part with this over the years. They open the door. It's they want their fetishes and kinks. Not all gay men, obviously. I'm speaking kind of generally, but I think that lesbians teaming up with gay men, the LGB umbrella itself, it's become problematic because lesbians have lost their own sense of community separate. Because if there was just a lesbian community, I don't think any of this would have got through the front door. I think a lot of this comes from this sort of fake union that hasn't actually served lesbians very well. I think gay men have piggybacked off, lovely lesbian couples, and I think a lot, even things like when they do surveys about gay parents are better than straight parents, a lot of that's based on the statistics coming from lesbians, and I think sadly it's a bit of an uncomfortable conversation to have. I don't know what do the rest of the women think.
I wanted to just say something about BDSM and gay men versus straight men. I think BDSM is a men sexuality that is led first historically by gay men and straight men in different ways. And so kind of saying, kinky people, I think women have been, if you study the history of BDSM, women have been kind of brought into this by the men they were seeing. I mean, we did like moving a little bit from the conversation, but gay men and BDSM is a thing. It's been a thing for a very long time, and it's not just a straight people's issue.
Well, here's the thing. So since this has been happening, I've spoken to a lot more of my lesbian friends and my gay friends and learned a lot of stuff that I didn't know before. And one of the things I never thought of before is how different male sexuality is to female sexuality. And just by that logic alone, what do lesbians have in common with gays anyway? Other than the fact that they are homosexual.
Yeah, just discrimination by law on the relationships. That's it. But in terms of experiences and everything, it's very different. And I really like what I read from Sheila Jeffries on that matter. And she said that gay men do not seek liberation from patriarchy. They just seek a comfortable space within the patriarchy. And that's a very important point, because for lesbians and for lesbian liberation, it's important to get that liberation on both of the homosexual front and the woman front. So that's why ultimately goals and desires will be different from the ones of gay men.
Yeah, I agree. I completely agree. And I think also because, as you were saying before, Lippy, that there was this conflation, the happy LGBT family, and thinking that we had the same issues, that we had the same struggles, and or that gay men struggle represent everybody else's issues, means that lesbian specific issues have been forgotten, dismissed, ignored, now demonized. And I think there's always going to be a problem when we organize in that way, that this might happen again, however good the intentions may be. I'm looking at LGBT Alliance, to be very, very frank, that, it's very, very important that within organizations that are mixed, in my opinion, there is a specific space for lesbians, and lesbian specific project, because we experience things very differently because we are women. And that's why we do things in the way we are doing things.
Yeah, and for me, in terms of LGBT Alliance, I really love what they're doing. I think they really, again, I agree with you, Angela, on that the lesbians and the gay men, sometimes it's not in their best interest to work together. But in terms of LGBT Alliance, I think, like, I was so happy when I saw them for the first time. Like, when I stumbled upon them on the internet, I was like so happy that this exists and that it exists in many countries, in Poland as well. And there is a small Polish LGBT Alliance, and I think this is just crucial because it's showing people that there is a different way, and I do believe that there's a lot of people that support LGBT people, but they could not express that support without agreeing on the TQI plus things. And with LGBT Alliance, finally, they can. It's still dangerous in terms of, oh, you're gonna be called transphobic for simply supporting LGBT people, but it's getting the publicity the LGBT Alliance is getting, the interviews, the conference in London. Like, imagine having LGBT Alliance conference in the heart of London with hundreds of people there. It's really making history now, and I think it's going to go into the good direction in here. And I do believe that it's very important what happens in United Kingdom, because it really affects what happens around the world. Like, every win that happens in the UK is something that can be celebrated by LGBT community across the world, just because of how big of an influence the things in this country have on the world politics and everything.
That's amazing to hear you say that, actually, because I've never thought about the implications of what happens in the UK around the world. I've never thought about if other people are looking at what we're doing. Never thought about it.
Everyone is looking at what you're doing, and we hear all about, in Poland we hear about Kira Bell's case, we hear about J.K. Rowling, we hear about Kathleen Stock, we have translations of interview with Kathleen Stock. All these things happen in my country, and I believe definitely in other countries in Europe they also there. So it's just very huge and very important. And at this point, we are not just a group of women who you can easily dismiss by just being, some crazy TERFs. When there are big names from abroad and big cases won and everything, it's really influential in that sense.
Yeah, I think the LGBT Alliance, although I can see some problems with lesbians not necessarily wanting to organise under the LGBT umbrella, I think that it is great just to have that visual thing to show that we're not with them. Basically, they're just crazy. Like most of us are just like, oh, do you know what I mean? Most people just want to have a normal life and not have to worry about being called a paedophile or losing their job. For having the wrong beliefs, and for being same-sex attracted.
Absolutely. My point was just saying that there is a risk. There is a risk that we have to look at. It's not to dismiss the work they are doing and the visibility they get, which is absolutely essential. I absolutely agree. It's just to say, there are also lesbian-specific issues. Let's not forget about them.
I agree, though, because I love the LGBT Alliance, and for me, like, selfishly, I quite like it because I can support lesbians, I can support bisexual, I can support gay, and not have to support all the other shit that I don't believe in, that's not actually a thing other than what people want it to be. So that's great for me, but I also find it interesting to hear about how lesbians do need their own spaces and their own things as well, and how different it is to what gay men need and what they want, and they probably need their own spaces as well. So there's probably room for all of it. What I see the LGBT Alliance doing, though, is really stepping away from the T for now, and then I think, like, I hate to say it this way, but I think like later down the line it will be more specific issues for lesbians, specific issues for gay men. But I hate to say it that way because it feels like, oh, women, you just have to wait here for a minute and while we sort out the big stuff. And I don't mean it that way, but it does come off that way, and it does feel like it's a bit like that as well, even though it shouldn't be. It does feel like, oh, there's a big issue we need to deal with now and we'll deal with women later.
Yeah, I think, like, having been at the conference recently, I think there was absolutely space, I think, that if, you know, when they hold the conference again next year, to have like a lesbian specific breakout group, to have a lesbian specific panel that can focus a bit more on lesbian issues. And I think actually the LGB Alliance is going to like try and focus a bit more on lesbian issues, especially with the BBC article that came out. I think that they have talked about, you know, pursuing like that avenue of investigation and research more. So that's also an absolute big help to, you know, your work as well, Angela.
Yeah. I mean, this is a thing. I think it's unfortunate that it took Angela's. I think he was working independently with that research. This is something that should have been under the purview of a lesbian, gay, or bisexual charity, and hopefully that we can start to build a space to get, you know, just like public money. We should be spending public money to look at something like this, you know. Stonewall gets lots of public money to do this sort of work, and it's not doing it, you know. So
exactly. I've been receiving quite a lot of shit, to be honest, quite a lot of criticism. I think a lot of it's been unfair, and a lot of it has been in bad faith as well. And the context of this research is, you know, done within an academic context, but with no funding. Like, this is done in my own time. This is done with no money. This is done, as we say, on the kitchen table. And it's done also in a situation of despair where we have, you know, tried to reach out, tried to raise the alarm, tried to say something is happening, and no one gave a crap about it. So at some point I thought, okay, you know, I'm keeping hearing these stories in my private circles. I want to actually see if I can find out some more, you know, and with the means that I had, which is not, you know, we are not Stonewall. Like, again, we don't get any money. So the sample is what it is because, you know, it was a short project, because it was self-directed, even if it was within university. And I keep on hearing a lot about, you know, it's not representative. And again, I want here to kind of defend a little bit my work if I have 5 minutes, because I'm fed up of hearing that, because it never claimed to be representative. It's 80 lesbians. It's not a quantitative study. It never claimed to do statistical generalization. It never claimed to say this can then be applied to the general lesbian population. Never. Its aim was to say, oh, here are some stories. These are some actual lesbians to whom this has happened to, because I don't want to hear anymore, this never happened. Here is a proof that it does happen. It was done 3 years ago and nobody picked up on it because nobody wanted to. Everybody looked the other way. Stonewall has got the funding. Stonewall never got into doing it because they don't want to see. And now they're criticizing that it's not done according to their standard. Go and fucking do it. Come on. You've got the cash. Go and do it. You have to do it because it would prove that, you know, it is happening.
Well, one thing I found quite ironic is all the criticisms that you've received for maybe having a small sample size, when the often quoted suicide statistic, I believe, was from a self-selection survey from 26 people, yet that goes all around the world. Absolutely. All of the dodgy statistics don't seem to get, nobody ever questions their methodology. And like you say, you didn't set out to say this has got statistical power behind it. This is what was just, as you say, to get those experiences down and to sort of stand witness and say, no, this did happen. It was wrong, and we need to have a talk about it. So,
what surprises me about that is that even one story from one lesbian woman would have been enough to should have been enough to sound the alarm.
Yeah, I think anybody who read that article and the thing they took away was, oh, the sample wasn't representative, is somebody who doesn't want to believe anything they're going to read. They just don't want to see that it's happening.
I think we have now a lot of evidence. This article researched like its own survivors. You're one of them, Kat. There was my own sample. We do have at least 10 testimonies on the Lesbian Me Too website. There are some women in the US, I'm thinking of Kitty and Max Robinson, who are working on this as well. there's loads coming. There's loads more coming. So again, if you, as you say, if you don't want to see, if you'd rather demonize rape victims, and it shows who they are.
Angela, can I ask you a question? What's next for you?
So we are carrying on the Lesbian Me Too project. It's really the big thing, because we want to give lesbians the space to be able to talk about what happened to them, not only in terms of cotton stealing, in terms of sexual violence in general, because if we can prove that sexual violence happened, then cotton stealing is one aspect of that, but it's a big aspect. And obviously for the news at the moment, it's a very, very big story. I don't really care about it in a very personal way. So this is our main focus at the moment. So I really encourage everybody. So if you're not a lesbian, please share the hell out of the website. It's called lesbianmetoo.com. If you are a lesbian and you've been affected, please consider leaving a testimony. It is completely anonymous. We will never ask you any detail. And you can share that around to all your lesbian network. Because every time somebody writes a story, then every time we can say, well, it happened to another one. So you can't say it never happens.
And also, I wanted to bring out, there is this book. Do you know about it? I don't know if showing my my phone to the screen works.
Yes.
You know this book, right?
Absolutely.
So maybe you can tell more about it. The book is called You Told Me You Were Different, an anthology of harm, but Angela can say more about this book.
Well, I haven't read it. I just ordered it recently because I had heard about it, but it's also, oh yeah, and I also, oh my God, there's so much going on. I also encourage everybody to order Janice Raymond's new book Double Think, because she's actually quoting quite a lot about what's going on in this book. It is testimonies of lesbians who have been in LGBTQ plus relationships, and discuss the way they have been groomed and brainwashed and abused within this. I do not know more because I haven't read it yet, so I'm going to be honest, but I'm really looking forward to receive it, and I think everybody should. I think it's Ugly Truth. What is it? How do you have the website?
It's You Told Me You Were Different.
Yes. Okay.
That's the.
We'll put it on the link. Yeah. Okay.
I'll put a link in the description below, so if anybody wants to follow up or have a look at it. Kat, where can we find you? Are you on the internet? Have you got any writing out there, any blogs or any things people can follow up on?
I don't. I've got my Twitter. So radfem_cath. But I don't have a blog going. I do a bit of writing, like you said, for the lesbian and gay news. I've written recently about the LGBT Alliance conference, but I'm hoping to write more about lesbian specific issues as well. But yeah, otherwise it's I like, it's Angela doing the fantastic work here of finding these testimonies. So she's the one to follow to find out more about what is happening here to lesbians.
I want to say as well, just going back to that, if you don't feel like you can do the Lesbian Me Too, but you would like to speak to me, please leave me a message on, whatever platform you are, or getthehelloutuk@gmail.com, because we do try to be in touch now with more cotton stealing survivors. I think it's quite important that we connect a bit more directly, so feel free to do that. Sorry.
Okay, fantastic. And Hancock, where can we find you? Are you on the internet?
Yes, I'm on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook under this. I don't know if the name is going to be visible, but just type in that and you can find me there.
Okay, fantastic. Well, I just want to say thank you for everybody coming on this week and sharing your experiences, sharing your stories, and just raising up the consciousness to people about a little bit about what's going on in various communities. As ever, please hit the like button down below, subscribe and share. This is Make More Noise, season 2, episode 2. Thank you very much for tuning in. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.